So let's get going. Of course, Commodore Uday Rao is an alumnus of the 4th integrated course of the Naval Academy in Kochi. He was commissioned into the Indian Navy on New Year's Day in 1974. He's a specialist in missiles and gunnery. He holds an MSc Defense Studies degree from the Madras University and is a graduate of the Defense Services Staff College in Wellington. He has subsequently also been a directing staff on its board. During his 34 years of naval service, Commodore Rao has commanded 3 frontline ships, the INS Kavarati, the INS Hosdurg, and the INS Gomati. There's also other shore units. He was deputed in 1978 to the then Soviet Union for 2 years for a course in missiles and gunnery, followed by appointment as commissioning crew of INS Rajput, also in the Soviet Union. He was a part of the IPKF operations and was Indian Naval Commander at Kankesanturai in northern Sri Lanka in 1987. He has also served as Chief Staff Officer at the Navy office in Chennai, where he oversaw operations in the Pok Bay, the Gulf of Mannar, and in the waters around Sri Lanka. An important appointment that he held was that of Principal Director Naval Intelligence at the Naval Headquarters in New Delhi for a period of 5 years, when he interacted very closely with the intelligence entities of the IAF, the Indian Army, and also with national agencies such as RAW and the IB. Commodore Rao has the distinction of having served as a director in the Cabinet Secretariat, where he handles strategic and security issues at the national level. He has also been a diplomat at Indian missions abroad. So pleasure to have you, Commodore Rao. Over to you, and we look forward to yet another stimulating session.
Thank you, Shashi. Thank you so much for the nice introduction. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you had a nice lunch. I wish we could have given you a maritime lunch consisting of fish and prawns. Unfortunately, we can't do it this time, maybe some other time. Okay, this session is about maritime and coastal security, and we have an impressive lineup of speakers, all very experienced. Now, actually, 2611 is something that changed the way we look at coastal security. Many questions remain unanswered about 2611. Since there was no inquiry at a national level, did we have intelligence? Did we fail to connect the dots, etc.? I'm sure our speakers will address that. But the question is, are we any safer today in 2020? The security establishment remains focused on J&K and Northeast. So who's minding the coastal borders? The government has done a lot of things, but much remains to be done. Issue is our federal structure of 9 coastal states and 4 union territories. Some of them do not take ownership at all, and they believe it is the center's responsibility. Some of them do not have maritime boards. Now, the maritime police do not have, the 13 maritime police of each and every state do not have seagoing cadres. They don't have training facilities which are dedicated. They're frequently transferred, and therefore the naval and coast guard training which we impart dissipates very quickly. The CAG has passed several strictures on these maritime police. There's a National Academy of Coastal Policing at Dwarka and Gujarat, which is being set up. And you'll be surprised to know that the headmaster is the BSF, Border Security Force. So what more can I tell about National Academy of Coastal Policing? The Navy and Coast Guard, there's a need to synergize, no doubt. And I'm sure Admiral Muralidharan will speak about it. But there appears to be some confusion in the role and responsibility of the two services. The Coastal Security Bill 2013 is yet to be passed. Now, actually, the question is, should the Navy be doing coastal security? Or should it be made the exclusive responsibility of the Coast Guard and give them operational control of the Marine Police? And we should leave the Navy, I feel, free to do blue water operations, nuclear strategy, etc. Increasingly, the police top brass are now feel that it's time to move the Coast Guard under the MHA. And there's also talk of a coastal border police force like a central armed police force. So therefore, what will happen is 12 years after 2611, we'll be creating a new organization, and therefore it will be work in progress. And one more layer. This is a clear indication that the state police is abdicating responsibility. But maybe that is the best way to go. We do not have a proper maritime governance structure. The present structure was made several years ago when the seas had not attained their importance. Okay, we have something the government, BJP government, soon after taking over, had said that they will set up a national maritime authority. They said this in 2014. This is 2021, and there's no sight of this multidisciplinary national maritime authority. So we have a national security advisor, a military advisor, a nautical advisor, but no maritime advisor or maritime authority. To speak on some of these issues or all of these issues, we have great speakers today, and I'm very happy to introduce Admiral Muralidharan, who's a very well-respected and highly professional officer who's commanded 3 frontline ships, including the destroyer Ranvijay, which is a Soviet-acquired ship, acquired from the Soviet Union. He's been a principal director of naval operations at NHQ. He's been an attaché in Moscow. So, Zdravstvuyte, Tavarish, that's what I'll tell my good friend. He's been flag officer to sea training. He's been a first commandant of the Naval Academy at Aimala. He's been the Director General Coast Guard. He is now in the part of the Armed Forces Tribunal. So you will see that he is a very, very, what should I say, astute person in his capabilities and achievements. And I'm sure he will deal with this topic in all its, glory, I should say. Thank you so much, and over to Vice Admiral Muralidharan.
Thank you, Commodore Rao, for that very, I would say, flattering introduction. And my fellow panelists, ladies and gentlemen, at the outset, let me thank the Institute of Contemporary Studies, Bangalore, the Chennai Center for China Studies, and the Press Institute of India for giving me an opportunity to be part of this very interesting webinar. We are discussing issues of critical national importance. Before I move on to how to synergize between the Navy and the Coast Guard and improve their capacity and capability to meet our security challenges, let me actually look at what itself are the security challenges that are facing us. Now, some of this have been covered in its and bits and parts in the previous session, but let me say that the maritime security in the 21st century assumes a much broader definition than the generally perceived purely military one. Towards the close of the 20th century, it was evident that in the maritime arena, security challenges indicated a shift from pure naval confrontation on the high seas to challenges, both conventional and non-conventional, in the littoral region. Now, they could be threats to the economic well-being of a nation, which in terms of energy, trade and commerce, living and non-living resources, or the social stability, which is actually crimes in the maritime arena, or political peace, that's the maritime sovereignty itself, or health of the people, which amounted to the environment. Now, geostrategic significance of the seas are well known to this audience. Nearly 70% of the earth is covered by sea, and 2/3 of our population lives within 100 nautical miles of the coastline. 80% of all major cities and trade centers, financial centers, are within 200 kilometers of a coastline. And most of the economic and industrial activities also occur in this area. The world trade itself is roughly 80% by volume and 70% by value. And there are close to 60,000 ships worth over $450 billion and generating close to 15 million jobs in this arena. As far as India is concerned, we are both a continental as well as a maritime nation. Our territory of a little over 3 million square kilometers and land frontiers 15,000 kilometers is, whereas the coastline is 7,500 kilometers. We have 9 coastal states, 4 union territories, and close to 1,200 islands, big and small. and an exclusive economic zone of 2.2 million square kilometers, with another 500,000 square kilometers to be added once the continental shelf delineation policies take place. Now, our geographical location close to the choke points of the Indian Ocean gives us a very vantage position in relation to the entire area from African coast to West Asia to Southeast Asia and now beyond into the Pacific Ocean. So therefore, we have a security and stake in all the waters in the Indo-Pacific region, even as mentioned also by our Honorable Prime Minister in the Shangri-La dialogue a few years ago. And needless to say, the maritime security environment in and around India has become more complex over the years for a variety of reasons. Now, what are the conventional challenges? Pakistan, our neighbor, continues to be inimical to us. Our critical energy flows from the Persian Gulf area actually come through the normal traffic lanes, are very close to Pakistan, making the entire thing very susceptible to interdiction in times of conflicts, not to mention the unconventional threats posed by the terrorist elements nurtured by Pakistan. Well, in a conventional conflict, we'll have to actually neutralize or comprehensively marginalize the Pakistan naval forces or maritime forces. But even in peacetime, we got to have regular monitoring of our sea lanes to ensure that our shipping is safe. As regards China, we have heard so much about it in the morning sessions. He's got vast economic interests now in the Indian Ocean region and has been actively engaging with all nations all along this area, specifically our neighbors, developing their maritime and military infrastructure and also extending economic help to the extent of binding them down in major debt traps. Now, looking at bases, they are looking at bases and diplomatic ties from Africa to Middle East to South Asia. It's all part of their strategy. Now, we have witnessed confrontation on the land borders. I'm not touching on it. While I would say that we have an edge over China in the Iowa region right now, but you've seen how they are developing the Navy, so it remains a major threat. Now, non-conventional military challenge or security challenges would include, or what in the Navy terms it as the LIMO, or low-intensity maritime operations, would include maritime terrorism, piracy, drug and human trafficking, gun running, poaching, and IUU, or illegal gathering of including gathering of sensitive economic data. Now, major problem that we face is that our vast coastline and uninhabited islands of our island chains are all susceptible to use for illegal activities. And possibly because of the complexity associated with maritime environment, we are fortunate that only about 2% of international terror attacks over the last 3 decades have happened at sea. However, and today we are having the anniversary of it, the 26/11 incidents at Bombay was an eye-opener, and therefore any terrorist activity could remain from any sector in the maritime area. Now, drug trafficking and drug running are often adjuncts to terrorism and actually funds terrorism. Piracy is another major challenge, though not exactly in our waters, but over the last 2 decades. Now, we have been associated with cooperative, we have been doing a lot of patrolling in this area of forces. And even now, just checking up this morning, the piracy reports as per the recap or the which is based at Singapore on the which monitors the piracy and shares information. 89 piracy attempts of various types have taken place even this year, when bulk of the year we have lost due to the COVID conditions. Now, human trafficking, illegal immigration, fortunately, we are not very much affected by it, but it's still a threat. If I move to economic challenges, essentially it's maintenance of the flow of trade and energy supplies through the sea lanes, which pass very close to our waters. And almost 80% of the world's trade by volume, and in our case, it's 90% of the volume, is a major challenge. Now, as I mentioned earlier, we have a stake in maintaining the communications in the Indo-Pacific remaining open at all time. And this would include defense of our offshore, coastal and offshore security infrastructure, refineries, offshore platforms, pipelines, and single buoy moorings. We also have a stake in our overseas exploitation efforts of overseas exploration that we are doing. Now, maritime security, when I talk of, also includes our over 2.2 million square kilometers of exclusive economic zone, which, as I said, will further increase. We have a pioneer status about 1.5 lakh square kilometers in the Central Indian Ocean, where we can recover and process polymetallic nodules as soon as the technology becomes more affordable for it. We have prospects in Antarctica. So all this wealth, we need to pressure that it is not taken up by surreptitious means by others, including gathering of seismic data. While we have dedicated sessions on these subjects of IUU fishing, I would only say that almost 20 to 30% of the total fisheries production in the world is suffering due to illegal fishing activities. Environmental security is another concern. With over 60,000 ships that transit in the Indian Ocean, major oil spills or even dumping of toxic waste is very much a possibility. And if it's close to our shores, it can have disaster, can be a disastrous thing to our environment and livelihood of all people who depend on it. Search and rescue or humanitarian assistance and disaster relief is another major challenge for security forces at sea. And smaller nations in the Indian Ocean always been looking up to us. Even recently, we provided a lot of help and evacuated even our own citizens from during COVID conditions. So the challenges to our security agencies range from national purely security to well-being. And in this regard, what Commodore was also mentioning, we had an overview of the maritime security was undertaken post 2611. And today, Indian Navy is the overall responsible for maritime security, which includes coastal and offshore security. Coast Guard is the authority responsible for coastal security in territorial waters and overall coordination between central and state agencies in all matters relating to coastal security. I will not go deeper into it as we are having a separate session on it. I would, however, it will be very evident that the bulk of security challenges in the maritime field have to be tackled between Coast Guard and the Navy by the regular surveillance and presence. Now, with the Navy going into mission-based deployment and our own national interests with the policies like Sagar and Coord extending into the Indo-Pacific, our naval forces are mostly operating out of the area, and with support from bilateral agreements, they can extend way out into that area and operate there. So Coast Guard would need to step in and look at the entire exclusive economic zone and closer to our waters. So therefore, both these forces need to have adequate force levels and synergy to coordinate mechanism to achieve common objectives. In my view, basic synergy between the forces existed right from inception of Coast Guard itself, as the idea germinated following the discussions at the third UN Conference on Laws of the Seas in the early 70s. So to safeguard national interest in maritime zones of India, the expert committee set up recommended that we have a separate force other than the Navy, and an interim Coast Guard was created using naval ships on the 1st of February 1977 to take on the non-military maritime duties, with the then Vice Chief of the Naval Staff as an officer on special duty to head it. Formally, the Coast Guard was formed under the CG Act of 19th August 1978 as a fourth armed force of the Union under the Ministry of Defense. Now, as a fledgling service carved out of the Navy, the initial 10 odd years, it was naval ships, and the Coast Guard is entirely manned by personnel, both at officer and the ratings level from the Navy, and similarly was the ships and establishments totally manned. It was commanded by Coast Guard officers or ex-IN officers who opted to join Coast Guard. While direct induction of officers and navics to the Coast Guard started soon after, since they had not attained sufficient seniority and experience, for some more time, the senior hierarchy remained from the Navy for an even longer period. But new ships soon joined, specifically designed to meet Coast Guard needs, and were commissioned. Gradually, the number of naval personnel manning Coast Guard ships and establishments have come down. And today, virtually all the posts in Coast Guard ships and establishments, including at senior levels, are tenanted by the Coast Guard officers and men. While the Director General of the Coast Guard continued to be from Navy from the inception, except on 2 occasions when they were held by naval officers who had been permanently absorbed in Coast Guard, from 2016, the Director General of the Coast Guards have also been direct entry Coast Guard officers, as by now they had attained sufficient seniority. So how do we then extend this synergy between the 2 forces? A major synergy exists because of the initial and subsequent professional training of Coast Guard personnel at the naval establishments. It gets further strengthened at middle and higher level by establishments such as the Staff College, the Naval War College, and the National Defense College. This sharing of facilities and commonality is a major linkage. While a Coast Guard Academy was set up, our foundation stone was laid very close to the Naval Academy. For a variety of reasons, it is not taken off and the venue has shifted. But it's to be noted that the Coast Guard Academy will only be to train on subjects specific to Coast Guard needs. In my view, Coast Guard should continue to use naval facilities and common professional training, as that will build lifelong linkages. It will also avoid duplication of facilities and save on manpower and training costs. With technology levels going up, I'm sure down the years, Coast Guard will look at even more technically qualified officers. And the ideal is there to conjoin them at the cadets level for training at the Naval Academy, and they get a 4-year BTech degree. While it's no longer essential to have naval personnel to man Coast Guard units, the commonality of training should be used for cross-manning of people on ships and selected establishments of each of the forces. The large number of small vessels and patrol vessels with the Coast Guard would provide invaluable sea legs to young naval personnel. And similarly, Coast Guard personnel could be deployed in naval units and even common aircraft, which we have, to create a manpower pool which can be used for deployment during prolonged operations in times of hostilities, including if we have to hire vessels from the trade to support our maritime operations. Now, Coast Guard is mandated to jointly operate with the Navy to tackle all the security challenges, both in peace and hostilities. And there's a joint ops room has been set up after the last review, where all the stakeholders for monitoring and controlling activities of coastal security are there. Further cooperation and transition to water-armed role can be achieved through regular exercises. While now the Coast Guard units come in where during major exercises or tactical exercise, etc., I think on regular basis they should be taking part. It will improve operation preparedness for joint missions. And similarly, the naval OPVs and patrol boats could, and surveillance aircraft could conjoin the exclusive economic zone patrols. While I do not intend to do a bean count of what kind of numbers or the platforms both forces need to meet the task envisaged, because that will need a full session. Now, while we are looking to induct a large number of ships and aircraft, however, in order to ensure that optimal use of resources and avoid duplication, development of plans of both forces and more so for platforms could be fine-tuned in consultation with each other. There's an existing forum of high-level Navy Coast Guard meeting of the Nav Guard, which is jointly chaired by the Vice Chief of the Naval Staff and the Director General of the Coast Guard. Now, while it's been established to enhance overall jointness and resolve contentious issues, it could be dovetailed to discuss the perspective plans. So the requirements of platforms for both the forces could be looked at to an extent to avoid duplication. And similarly, the naval specifications or specific requirements could be incorporated to the extent possible in Coast Guard ships at the time of they're being constructed to avoid, such as, for example, to stage through larger naval helicopters on Coast Guard ships or to even for transiting through them. And similarly have fitted for options to retrofit specific naval weapons or sensors which could be used in times of prolonged hostilities and for monitoring. Such a thing at design stage would enable quick upgrade of the Coast Guard to enhance their combat capability when called for and to operate alongside naval forces in high threat environments. Logistics, maintenance and communication facilities are the other areas for synergy. While Coast Guard initially used to share all that with the Navy, now they started setting up their own facilities or depending upon commercial facilities for it.
Admiral, 2 minutes to go.
Thank you. They should share facilities with the Navy. And similarly, while synergy at lower levels or working levels is important, we need to have it also at higher levels by posting people of the rank of Rear Admiral Commodore, IG, DIG in each other's service headquarters, the seaboard headquarters, the Coast Guard, regional area levels. Now, with more joint operations that we are trying to look at, integration at joint commands, etc. Well, we started with the Coast Guard component in the Port Blair area, in the Tri-Service Command. We could do so at the CDS team, at CDS staff and the integrated staff. Well, I would not say that all this would remove because there will always be the kind of sibling rivalry in between the services, and there's also difference in service conditions, but these would go a long way in synergy. I would take a minute more to say that I read some media reports that DGPs have been recommending to the Home Ministry to bring Coast Guard under MHA for better coordination of multiple central agencies. The report talks of shallow water operations and coastal communities interaction. Well, Coast Guard and the Navy already does to an extent regular interaction. And similarly, purely to shift it to MOD, I think MOD to MHA would be counterproductive. Maritime security is far more than coastal patrolling, and you can't look at it through the prism that you're doing a BSF or ITBP is doing at land borders. Now, as I mentioned, mission-based deployments in the Navy are taking it further away. Therefore, the Coast Guards used to be look at more at our area, like the US Coast Guard looks at their areas in this. At this juncture, I'd also say that we worthwhile considering for synergy a recommendation that was made past 2611, but we did not accept it. That is to have a CNC Coastal Command at the level of a Vice Admiral of a Navy, to whom the Coast Guard and all other units responsible for coastal security would report, and the CNC himself would be reporting to the Chief of the Naval Staff. Now, Australia has a similar organization. It will not only foster closer links between Navy and the Coast Guard, but would also be in keeping with the vision of our former Raksha Mantri, the late Mr. Manohar Parrikar, who talked of seamless synergy between Indian Coast Guard and the Indian Navy at all levels. I would sum up by saying that maritime security challenges are today transcending political borders. So cooperation in intelligence, surveillance, network, data sharing, and effective patrolling would allow nations and maritime agencies to monitor oceans more effectively. Our Navy and Coast Guard have been interacting regularly with other maritime forces to enhance interoperability and confidence building. So therefore, a coordinated and consolidated approach between the maritime forces, primarily the Navy and Coast Guard, with all other stakeholders is the need of the hour to meet our maritime security challenges. Thank you.
Thank you, Admiral. That was a very insightful talk, and your pitch for synergy carried the right notes. With that, we'll move on to the next speaker, Captain Himadri Das. Himadri is currently at the National Maritime Foundation. He is a navigator by specialization and has an extensive experience in training assignments at the Naval Academy, at the ND School, at the workup team. He is a scholar sailor, a cerebral type. He's written a book on coastal security. He's writing one on maritime governance. He's also worked with maritime doctrine and concepts. As you can see, he has a large number of achievements in the academic field, maritime academic field. And we look forward to Himadri Das and his talk. Over to you, Himadri.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon. It's indeed an honor for me to be here this afternoon amongst this distinguished panel here. Indeed, there could not have been a more suitable day to discuss coastal security, today being the 12th anniversary. At the outset, I'd like to convey my sincere gratitude to the organizers, especially Commodore Vasan, Commodore Rao, for having given me this opportunity, and to Aishwarya for all the help that she's provided in the last few days. I'll begin the presentation with a few slides, which I think perhaps will set the context of what we're going to discuss about. The threat from maritime terrorism is real. While we don't really have any particular headlines in 2020, a few days earlier, the Chief of Naval Staff and the Chief of Air Staff highlighted the dangers from asymmetric and hybrid threats and the need to contend with such threats. A few more headlines again from 2019. I think what's important to note is the increasing role of intelligence agencies in the maritime security framework, and that several states have been the focus of threats. Moving on to the presentation, after a brief introduction and a recap of the construct, I will move on to the more substantive part of the presentation, which is the challenges and the prospects. Commodore Rao in his introduction did mention some of the challenges, and I'll try and amplify on those as we move ahead. The long coastline and the number of islands, etc., are pretty well known. Commodore Rao in the opening address did mention about the federal governance structure, and I think it's a very important point that he made, and I'd like to reiterate that. So what really happens is that we have about 13 different administrative units, and if you go down to district level, there would be about 70 different administrative units who handle coastal security matters, and that itself is a challenge. The economic importance of the coast needs no reiteration to this August audience. This was also highlighted by the Prime Minister during his Independence Day speech earlier this year. But I'll just like to make a few points about the developments recently. Insofar as ports are concerned, in the government's effort to transform the ports and create world-class inland waterways, the Prime Minister announced renaming the Ministry of Shipping as the Ministry of Port, Fishing, Port, Shipping and Waterways. And I think that also brings about greater clarity about the distribution of work in the government as far as these sectors are concerned. The second point, I think, a development has been the announcement of the Pradhan Mantri Matsya Sampada Yojana earlier this year. It's a 20,000 crore project over 5 years. And earlier this morning, we heard Dr. Das talking about binaries, about security and development, etc. And I think what I see is a convergence, because this program does cater for security requirements as well. On the tourism front, I think about 10 odd beaches have been given an international certification of blue flag, and essentially it meets certain safety, security and other criteria. Historically, both Commodore Rao and Admiral Muralidharan did cover aspects, and I think there are four main drivers of the construct that we have. Some of them are flashed on the screen. I think the Mumbai blasts of 1993 highlighted the dangers or the potential which criminal elements can, rapidly metamorphose into more insidious threats. And Admiral Muralidharan did mention about it a little while earlier. And I think the first wave of reforms in the maritime security governance structure was the Group of Ministers report of 2001, which led to the State Marine Police and other developments in intelligence, etc. Finally, today is 12 years since 26/11/2008, and I think that brought about what I would say the second wave of reforms in maritime security governance in India. Admiral Muralidharan did mention some of the non-traditional threats, and what I have flashed on the screen is a summary of what we have witnessed in India in this year, and I have sourced it from the IFC IOR monthly updates, which are available on their website. So essentially, we have most of the threats that Admiral Muralidharan mentioned about. But I'll just like to make 2 points here. Maritime crime is indeed endemic to various areas in India. And the second point is that in a country which has recorded more than 52 lakh cognizable crimes in 2019, I think in sheer numbers, the crimes are insignificant. But again, the Mumbai blasts are a poignant reminder of the dangers if you don't keep a watchful eye on crimes in all its forms. Some of the concerns we heard Captain Agarwal speaking this morning on the Chinese research ships in the Indian Ocean region. We had some Chinese vessels also in the Indian EEZ who were investigated about. And so that's one of the linkages with the overall theme of this. And so how do we actually link up? Actually, many of the systems that were established post 2611, such as the MDA system, the Information Management Center, which is monitoring many of these activities, provide the foundations to respond to such threats. I'll just cover the coastal security construct very briefly, just for a recap requirement. And really, because the theme of this session is on governance, this is a broad governance structure which we have anywhere. Coastal security essentially involves various segments, and as per the Schedule 7 of the Constitution, these responsibilities are distributed between the center and state. So what you have is a large number of stakeholders in this entire construct who work under the center or the state, and they need to interweave their initiatives into one comprehensive arrangement. So coordination does become a challenge. As far as responsibilities are concerned, the Department of Border Management and the MHA is actually responsible for all matters related to coastal borders, but excluding those which are the responsibility of the MOD and the MEA. Towards the last part of last year, the Department of Military Affairs was also created under the MOD, and therefore the MOD has the IN under the DMA and the Coast Guard under the DOD, and that adds a new dimension to how maritime security will be managed. The MHA, as was brought out earlier, does not have a force under itself. The states and the coastal police provide that element of the defense. This slide really represents the outer limits of jurisdiction, which starts from the baseline of India. The state marine police is restricted to 5 nautical miles in view of capability gaps, and overlap is provided by the Coast Guard. As far as the policy coordination mechanisms are concerned, we've really seen a development post 2611. Earlier, there was essentially state-level initiatives, and post 2611, what we've seen is the expansion of this coordination right from the district level up to the national level and thereafter. But what it really lacks is an apex-level standing body at any level. We've also seen some efforts at zonal coordination to the interstate state councils or at the police level, etc. But I think that's also going to be one of the things for the future, as to how do you coordinate in respective states. In addition to these designated forums for coastal security, you have a large number of other forums where coastal security issues are discussed, or other security issues, and they all add up into the overall effort at strengthening security in India. We have been discussing MDA and Dr. Das in the morning did mention that we've been largely event-driven, and rightfully so. The MDA effort really went to the next level after 2611. Not that we didn't have systems earlier. We had certain legacy systems, and they've now all been combined with electronic surveillance. Primary among them is the radar chain, which the Coast Guard established, and the NAIS chain, which was established by the Director General of Lighthouse and Lightships. And important, I think this was a revolution in the way we do MDA in India, was the setting up of the NC3I network. What this network essentially does is it links up the Navy and the Coast Guard and interfaces a large number of sensors and databases. But what's important to know is what it does not do. What it does not do is it does not link all the stakeholders in the coastal security construct, and it does not integrate all sensors or databases that are nationally available. As far as operational coordination is concerned, I highlighted how intelligence integration has improved over the years, and the multi-agency center continues to be the principal mechanism for information sharing, intelligence sharing. And it is no secret that a large number of operations in recent times have been intelligence driven. As far as operational coordination is concerned, what we see is at the foundational level is the hub and spoke model, which is between the Coast Guard and the Marine Police. Thereafter, the Navy and the Coast Guard were linked, and at the apex level, we have the joint operation centers. Moving on to the wider community, going beyond security agencies, you have the fisheries sector. The fisheries sector has actually seen a large number of initiatives over the last 12 years. And these have been taken both by the center and state. Right on top, what I've written is about the tracking system, or the transponder system, which recently has, earlier this year, finished its trials and is now ready to be deployed. We've had initiatives taken by states such as Tamil Nadu with the Thondi app, or Karnataka with the Kadalu app, who've gone about trying to monitor movements on boats, etc. And a whole lot of other initiatives to improve the monitoring and control of such systems. The important ones, of course, are the setting up of the Department of Fisheries as a department by itself, the Pradhan Mantri Matsya Sampada Yojana. We are also steering a National Maritime Fisheries Act, and some states like Gujarat have already strengthened their Fisheries Act, and some other states such as Karnataka are in the process of strengthening their acts. As far as ports are concerned, the major ports are ISPS compliant, which is an international code of the IMO, and the non-major ports are governed through certain guidelines which have been incorporated. Community engagement, which actually started in the maritime context after OPSWAN, through setting up of by the Navy and the state governments, certain groups, has actually consolidated itself, and it's now all over India. And we've taken a large number of initiatives in that regard. But what we don't really have is an institutional mechanism, such as the civil defense or the home guards, and on a pan-India basis, actually. As far as training is concerned, Governor Rao did mention about the National Academy of Coastal Policing, which was set up with the BSF, but the Navy and the Coast Guard continue to provide training to the police and other central armed police forces. I think the coastal security exercises, which are held twice the year, conducted by the Coast Guard, I think are unique by themselves, and I don't think they have any land-based parallel wherein the entire machinery of a state actually activates itself for a couple of days and go check the responses and address vulnerabilities, etc. Exercise Sea Vigil 2019 was, I think, a high point insofar as the progression of the construct was concerned, because we got the entire nation to act together for a couple of days, and we did audits and contingencies, and I think it was the largest ever deployment of assets for a maritime exercise in India, perhaps anywhere in the world. Now moving on to the most substantive part, I covered some of those in the discussions while I was doing. The first, of course, is apex level coordination. In 2001, the group of ministers did recommend an apex body for maritime affairs to provide institutionalized linkages between the Navy and the Coast Guard. This was also announced by the President in 2014, the government's intention to set up an NMA. The Standing Committee of Defense also recommended a Maritime Commission in 2014. The Public Accounts Committee recommended the need for an effective mechanism for coordination, and this was again reiterated by them in 2020. So what we have is the MCS, which is the apex body, which is chaired by the cabinet, which is chaired by the cabinet secretary and secretary level officers, the chief of naval staff, the DGCG are members of this committee. So I think that was the first waypoint as we move ahead on the track to improve our governance structures. The second waypoint, of course, would need to be a national level body. We have already spoken of certain overlapping responsibilities between ministries and agencies like the Navy and the Coast Guard. Admiral Muralidhar did mention about those themselves. And I'd just like to spend a little while on this slide. This actually is a schematic which represents the relationship and overlaps between maritime security agencies. What really happens is over time they evolve, and they are dependent on a large number of factors, which could be the threat perception, which could be legacy issues, the method of governance in respective countries, etc., etc. But in most countries, it's a hybrid model where uh, maritime security agencies actually have overlaps in their function, and that's true in India as well, wherein you have the Navy, the Coast Guard, the police, the customs, the marine enforcement wing, etc., all working together to one, despite them having their primary roles separately for this. The idealized structure is perhaps only in one country, and that's perhaps the United States. And I don't think there are any other country which has a purely idealized where they work completely distinctly. Even in the case of India, as what about Admiral Muralidharan earlier, the raising of the Coast Guard in 1974, the discussions in 1974, the Navy proposed the raising of a Coast Guard towards this clear distinction of responsibilities. And the Group of Ministers report of 2001 also recommended a one border, one force model. So that's perhaps the second challenge. And what really happens is that when there are overlaps, it could lead to dilution of focus from the primary responsibilities, and that also increases the scope of friction. But
Madhuri, just 3 minutes more.
Right, so the legal challenges are several. What's happening is that we are working on Anti-Maritime Piracy Bill of 2019 and then MFRA, which I mentioned about, and the state MFRAs. The four challenges about the sensor coverage. We've worked a lot on the sensor coverage issue, but can we achieve seamless gap coverage is one of the issues that I mull over, and I think that's quite a challenge that we have. Earlier in the day, we heard the professor speak about satellite coverage, and we have indeed used satellite-based coverage to some extent. National MDA is what I already have mentioned about many of our sensors not being integrated. The sixth channel is, of course, about Fisheries MCS, or monitoring, control, and surveillance. It actually involves two segments. One is the small boat tracking, where we talk of the transponders, and when we look up ashore, it's about movement ashore, and some steps have been taken by steps, but I think we are far away from a robust system of monitoring of movements. Port security, we generally have achieved a minimum standard which is internationally acceptable, which is the ISPS code. But considering the threat perception that we have, I think we need to perhaps go beyond that. As far as non-major boats concerned, is we have a guidelines from the center, but they are not mandatory. And I would think that we would need to go down the mandatory route sooner than later. Maintenance of small craft, especially of the state marine police, has been a matter of concern. It's also been a matter of concern for larger forces as well. So I think that's one area where the technical groups really need to work on how do we get it done best. And moving on to the prospects, Commodore Varson in one of his recent articles mentioned the situation of cautious optimism. And I think I agree with him. And what I'll try and do is, in the next 2 minutes, cover the cautious part and the optimism part, the optimism first. I think there's going to be incremental progress in strengthening of maritime security and coastal security in India. I think there's no doubt about that. I have a little difference with Commodore Rao about the role of states in maritime security. My reading is that the states are going to take a larger part, and that's based on whatever research I have done. I also see that there is going to be increasing internalization of security issues and development agenda, as witnessed in the PMMSY program. The NMA and NMDA form will certainly be progressed in some form or the other. It's taken a while, but I think these are ideas whose time has come. I'm fairly certain that maritime security laws will continue to get strengthened. It's a nascent subject and it will take time, and so it's going to happen. The MDA concept will get widened. We spoke of UDA, we spoke of space, and all the contiguous domains will get integrated into the MDA concept. There is going to be greater interagency coordination, and the process of breaking of silos will continue. I have seen the 3 more slides, sir, I'm going to finish. I have seen the role of the state marine police increase over time. They're getting involved in disaster response, search and rescue, lockdown implementation, etc. And I see that only growing with time. They have a capacity constraint, but I think that's getting better. Fisheries MCS is improving. Much of the coastal security effort is based on indigenous shipbuilding and technologies, and that's going to help us in other fields as well. The community is going to get, there is going to be greater maritime consciousness. As far as the caution which is concerned, is the threat from seaborne threats is real. Local maritime crimes will continue to be endemic, and we need to be watchful of that. Achieving grab-free surveillance, I think, is improbable, and operational commanders have to be aware of that. And another thing of note is that there is going to be continued disparity between states. All states won't respond equally. Each has its own constraints, threat perception, etc. Strengthening of SMP, as brought about by Commodore Rao, will indeed be slow because it depends on the MHA for financial support. There is a high chance of mismatch between promise and delivery between projects and their implementation. And because of the overlaps, there is going to be chances of higher friction, which Admiral Muralidharan spoke about, and they have to be managed. Last item, particularly, I'm particularly interested, I don't have an answer, is how would the DMA and Theatre Command interface with the coastal security construct? The second is, do we need to continue in hybrid models, or do we go down the idealization path, which I showed in the slide earlier? And when we say about institutionalizing community support, do we go down the militia road, or are we just okay with the systems that we have? In conclusion, as brought out in the beginning part of this session, indeed, much progress has been made, but there still are several gaps to address. And as our External Affairs Minister had mentioned, that border guarding is a 24/7 operation. It's not an event. It's got an ever-widening scope, and it's an endless process in itself. Thank you very much, and I hope I have not exceeded my time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Himadri. That was a very brilliant talk, very exhaustive, and I'm sure your pictorial will be of a lot of use to our youngsters who may not know the lay of the land or lay of the sea for that matter. So that pictorial talk was very good. I noticed that you're very optimistic, but don't forget that Jaish-e-Mohammed and Lashkar-e-Taiba and Qasams are not going to wait for all our plans to fall into place. But we can have different opinions. I agree with what you have said. That was a good talk. Well done. Now, of course, we move on to the next speaker. That is Mr. Sandeep Punnithan, who is the executive editor of India Today. He is a well-known figure in defense and security circles. I'm sure you see him constantly on TV, enlightening us on various aspects of the issues on defense and security. He's written a book on called Black Tornado. It's here. I have read his book, very interesting. And I believe he's written another book called Operation X. So we look forward to his talk on lessons of 2611. I may tell you that he comes from a naval family, very much like me. And therefore, it's over to Mr. Sandeep Punnithan now.
Thank you. Thank you, Commodore Rao. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be here with you. It's an honor, in fact, to address you here this afternoon. And as my speakers before me have mentioned, that this is a very solemn occasion that we are speaking on today. This is the 12th anniversary of the 2611 attacks. And everyone remembers where they were today, 12 years ago, when terrorists were rampaging through the city of Mumbai, attacking at will, bombing and shooting innocent civilians. And my thoughts are with the families of the people who've lost their near and dear ones. And with that, I move on to my presentation. Are you seeing the screen? I'm having a bit of a problem here. Is it clear now?
It's in the same format. All of them are up in the same screen. You may have to select them individually and blow it up.
Sandeep, you're in the sorter mode. Go to the
Okay.
slideshow mode. Yeah, now it's the original one. Now you just go to the slideshow mode.
Oh, okay. Sorry, Google Hangouts is not my thing. It's usually Zoom, and this Skype for me. So is it clearer now?
We can see it now. Don't worry too much. You can proceed because we can read it.
Oh, okay, perfect. So my point was that in what we're witnessing in India and indeed in Mumbai over the last few years, it's actually the weaponization of terrorism. It's not so much terrorism as much as it's proxy war. And it's the act of a state actor that's using a non-state actor to paint these off as, random acts of terrorism for reasons of plausible deniability and what have you. Now, in 1993, the first lesson, of course, is the fact that Mumbai 2611 was not the first attack. You had the 1993 Mumbai serial blast. It was called Bombay in those days. It at 13 different locations on the 13th of March, where 300 persons were killed and 400 persons were injured. It's the largest attack of its kind in the world at that time. And very interestingly, there's a phase 2 of these attacks where underworld gangsters who'd been trained in Pakistan to use AK-47s and throw grenades were supposed to attack targets in Mumbai like the Mantralaya building, the BMC building, and gun down government officials. Now that plan, fortunately for us, didn't come to fruition because the trained youth somehow lost their nerve and, thank God for us, panicked and ran away. Then in 2006, you have the second major such attack, which is 7 bombs going off simultaneously on 7 moving suburban trains in Mumbai, where 209 persons are killed and 700 people are injured. Then 2611, you know what happened? A fishing trawler anchors off the coast. It discharges a rubber boat where 10 Lashkar-e-Taiba terrorists are on board, and they come in ashore, split into 5 buddy pairs, and proceed to target key installations across the city. 166 civilians are killed, and police personnel lose their lives before the terrorists are neutralized several days later. Now, all of these attacks have something in common, and you don't have to be a military analyst to figure out what. They're all well coordinated. If you look at it, whether it's starting from the left to the right, it's the 1993 serial blast, the 2006 blast, and 2611. They're all coordinated to go off in near simultaneous time, whether it's bomb blasts or the fact that you have these.
Sandeep, you're still on the same slide.
Oh, right. Sorry. Is it visible now?
Yes, visible.
Oh, perfect. Okay, so I was just explaining the fact that all 3 attacks are very well coordinated. And you know, whether it's 93 or it's 2006 or 2008. Now, these are the 3 biggest attacks that have taken place over a 15-year period in Mumbai. And all of them are well coordinated. They happen within a span of a few hours in Mumbai, in all 3 attacks. It's a very similar pattern. Now, when I see a pattern like this, the obvious thing is that this is something that's taught to special forces usually. You know, when you're asked to attack simultaneously to overwhelm the OODA loop of your enemy, overwhelm him, you know, make him think that you are many more in number than you actually are, and you know, overwhelm your security forces, their response, etc. And so my question is that could these attacks have all been military special forces attacks actually carried out by civilians? The civilians could be gangsters, they're Fidain or non-state actors, but all these attacks, because they follow a certain pattern, they all seem to have their origin in the military. And this is lesson number 2. And this I got from a Marine commander who I was interviewing for the book, Black Tornado. And he mentioned the fact that, you know, the strange thing about this attack is, this is something what we practice for. This is exactly how we train. We are brought in covertly near an enemy shore. We are launched by a rubber boat stealthily. We hit the shore. We break up into buddy pairs. We go and hit the targets and then extract, come back to our boat. And then, you know, there's a complete extraction phase. Mumbai 2611, to my mind, is nothing but a military naval special forces raid carried out by non-state actors with the support of the deep state. And I'll explain how. So the minute I heard this, I started going through all my notes and looking for a naval connect in these attacks. And sure enough, I come across the interrogation of David Headley by the NIA in New York about 10 years back, where Headley tells them something very interesting, that there was actually a Pakistan Navy frogman called Abdur Rahman who meets the LET leadership in Muzaffarabad, and he actually advises them on how to go about this raid. Now, Headley describes this meeting that taking place in March of 2008, and this person who he calls Abdur Rahman is a clean-shaven man in his mid-30s with a crew cut, and he believes Rahman to be a frogman of the Pakistan Navy, but he also believes that Abdur Rahman was not his real name because Headley was introduced to him as Abdul Qadir. Now, Rahman has been brought in for a very key phase of the planning, that he's brought with him several nautical charts of the west coast of India, and he's starts discussing options of where to land the LET squad. He gives them very interesting inputs like, drop the attackers 60 kilometers off the coast to avoid detection. He asked the LET to complete all their planning before June. And this is very interesting again, because because the seas in Mumbai, he says, become very rough during the monsoons. And so he also probably told them the exact time and the date when to strike. And he also asked them to check the position of the naval warships in order to avoid an engagement at sea. And the meeting was very detailed. It continued for a second day. Headley wasn't part of the meeting on the second day. I really wonder what transpired there. But the fact is that this is possibly the clearest link of a military involvement, a naval involvement with the planning of 2611. And this kind of solves one of the biggest mysteries of how a group called the Lashkar-e-Taiba, which is primarily a landlocked militant outfit, which operates across the, in Kashmir and a few urban terror attacks, how it suddenly gets the expertise to launch a special forces raid across the sea and, insert these 10 terrorists using the classic techniques that a naval special forces team would use. And Headley, of course, works on these aspects, and he goes back to Mumbai. He's, of course, running a cover over there. He's running a travel agency, and he goes and starts recceing the spots, the landing spots. He hires a fishing trawler, goes around Mumbai, the coast. He looks for places for the attacks team to land. He gets GPS coordinates. He gives them back. There's a lot of planning. There's a lot of back and forth that takes place before the attackers actually land there. Now, what additional help could a naval, state actor like a naval force have given these terrorists when they infiltrated across Karachi to come to Mumbai? Now, the fact is that in 2008, November of 2008, when the Al-Husseini, which is the Lashkar-e-Taiba vessel, starts its journey from Karachi, you have a very significant exercise of the Navy that's going on there. It's Tropics, it's their annual exercise, a gigantic exercise. And this, coincidentally, is the time that this LET vessel chooses to sail through. And who but a naval force could have given them the time, indicated the passage to infiltrate through the Indian Navy and the Coast Guard that are out there, and even suggest possibly the strategy of hijacking an Indian fishing vessel like the Kuber, which the LET finally did, to complete this thing of a Trojan horse coming into the Indian shores. Now, this is I go back to how it works on the line of control with Pakistan. How does the Pakistan Army facilitate infiltration across the LOC? Which it's very simple. The Pakistan Army is the nodal agency. Militants are brought to an army camp. They're kept there for days till the time there's a perfect time that's they figured out for crossing. And they're given the weapons, they're given the equipment, the guide even, and then they're infiltrated across the LOC. The army gives them the exact location of where to infiltrate, and they even give them the covering fire, which is what you frequently see now on television. The firing is basically to cover the ingress of the militants. And this possibly is exactly what happened in 2611. The Pakistan Navy gave them the exact time, the place, and the the exact route with which to infiltrate. And they coincidentally infiltrate when Tropics is in its withdrawal phase, when all the ships are actually going back to their ports. And I'm sure a lot of the service officers here would know what that phase is like when everyone's in a hurry to get back home. You're tired, spending weeks out at sea, and this is when the Al Husseini makes its journey through to the coast of off the coast of Gujarat, where it hijacks the Kuber. Now, if you ask someone, say from the Mumbai police, who the perpetrators of all these attacks in 1993, 2006, and 2008 were, the obvious answer would be, oh, 93 was the Mumbai underworld. 2006 was LET and Indian Mujahideen, and 2008 was LET, very clear. A few others would say, well, it's the ISI, they're behind all these guys, and they're non-state actors. And now this is where this elaborate game of smoke and mirrors comes in, this whole narrative building that kicks in, which is why we miss the big picture, which is the identity of the perpetrator of all these terror attacks, and indeed the proxy war that we've been at the receiving end for several decades, is nothing but the Pakistan Army. And the deep state in Pakistan is actually run by the Pakistan Army. And this is the creature that we're dealing with, that is an organization that learned the tricks of the trade during the Afghan war between 1979 and 1988. And it learned its game there, and it supersized that game. It started this with considerable success, according to them, in Kashmir, where they've tied down a large number of Indian forces there. And slowly they've infiltrated these techniques into the Indian mainland, starting with Delhi, and they've, the attacks in Mumbai that I mentioned. And now the interesting part is that the hand of the ISI is very clear in all of these attacks, especially when you look at 1993, which is when the underworld, this Dawood Ibrahim gang, is recruited to launch, to smuggle RDX and train youth into Mumbai to carry out those serial blasts that I just mentioned. Now, the interesting part is this guy called Tiger Memon, who's this Dawood Ibrahim gang member on the ground, who's actually the key person planning and executing these attacks. There's a transformation in Tiger Memon when he visits Dubai and Pakistan, one of his trips before the March 93 attacks. When he comes back from these trips, he starts talking to his gang members like a general. I mean, his idea, he starts talking about targeting, oil refineries, the Mumbai Stock Exchange, the international airport, 5-star hotels, government buildings, and his gang members are horrified. I mean, he's talking like a military man. And this is what, to a lot of you in the armed forces, would be like someone reeling out a list of vital areas and vital targets. And this is exactly, how did this 2-bit silver and gold smuggler turn into this this military mind? Who gives him the vision and the ideas for all of this? And we have to look no further than Lieutenant General Javed Nasir, who was the DG ISI at that time. Now, Javed Nasir is one of the most controversial figures within the Pakistan Army, even at that time. He was the DG ISI, like I mentioned. He advocated a bigger role for Pakistan fighting for persecuted global Muslims, and he's a sort of an Islamist Trotskyite. And what was his position before DGISI? And you won't believe this, he was the Director General of the Pakistan Ordnance Factories. This is the Pakistan Ordnance Factories that actually supplied nearly 1 ton of RDX to blow up buildings in Bombay in 93. And the RDX is what was shipped in on the boats ahead of the 1993 serial blasts. And that is where the maritime link comes in. Now, who was the DG ISI in 2006, and indeed becomes the army chief in 2008 when the terror attacks are carried out? It's none other than General Ashfaq Kayani. He is possibly the only Pakistan DG ISI to have become army chief. This is the only time it's happened in Pakistan's 73-year history. And of course, it's just a coincidence that he would have, been this very key person who knew everything that was going on in the ISI and in the Pakistan Army. And this is the person who was there in these two very, very significant terror attacks in 2006 and 2008. So let's just consider what a neutral witness has to say about the identity of these perpetrators. I mean, of course, if it comes from us, then we are biased because we have an axe to grind against the
Sandeep, 3 minutes more.
Yes. So I'm just finishing up. So there's a book by Dr. Hein Kiesling, who's a German researcher, a German political scientist who's lived in Pakistan for 13 years. He's written one of the handful of books on the ISI. It's called Faith, Unity, and Discipline. And he says very clearly in this book, you should read it. He says that an analysis, I'm just reading out from the book, an analysis of Mumbai events must ask the question whether the leadership of the ISI and the GHQ were informed beforehand about the planned terror attacks. One answer common among writers is the idea of an ISI within an ISI. He says this is erroneous, and this phrase must have been deliberately created by the ISI itself. He says Pakistan's prime intelligence service is strictly led. It's an efficiently run organization with no room for groups pursuing their own secret agenda. And operations such as the Mumbai attacks, which needed expert technical assistance, money and time to prepare, could not have been carried out or kept hidden without the service's leadership. Considering the political explosiveness of the event, the chief of the army staff would have been informed. Now, why did they do it? Simple answer: because they could. Pakistan has two strategic assets. It's got the shield of nuclear weapons, and it's got the sword of the so-called non-state actors, the terrorist groups. And it's over the years, it's combined both of these into what Commodore Uday Bhaskar calls nuclear weapons-enabled terrorism, which is the shield of nuclear weapons protecting the sword of this death by 1,000 cuts guerrilla war. And the narrative that's being built is that if you touch us, we are going to nuke you. That narrative has continued for over 30 years. It's changed a bit somewhat. I'll just come to it in my last slides. The lessons for lesson number 4 is, of course, coastal security and coordination. My speakers before me have spoken about it extensively, Admiral Muralidharan and Captain Das. But the most important lesson to me has been coordination, the fact that earlier you were basically working in silos. And post 2611, one of the biggest achievements of the government has been to get all the stakeholders to speak on the same table, get them to meet across a table. One of the most important parts of this is the multi-agency multi-agency center that's run by the IB, which the MAC, which meets every single day, and that is, to me, one of the biggest intelligence-related breakthroughs of post 2611 lessons that we've learned. The final lesson is the counter NWET strategy, which is what has taken us several years to figure out. And this lesson comes out of basically knowing your enemy and you know his game plan. If you don't know your enemy and you don't know his game plan, then you can't deter him and you can't have claimed to have learned anything from 2611. Now, it's taken us 8 years to reach there. We first had the first big retaliation after 2611. That was in 2016. You know what happened in Uri? You had cross-border surgical strikes. And then finally in 2019, you had IAF jets crossing the border and dropping bombs in Balakot. I'm not getting into how many terrorists were killed in Balakot, whether it was 5 or 500. The larger point is that Pakistan's nuclear bluff has been called, that nuclear weapons-enabled terrorism has been called. It doesn't matter if the bombs fell on the camp or they didn't fall on the camp or how many people died. The bombs may have fallen in Balakot, but the impact has been felt in GHQ Rawalpindi. And that, I think, is the biggest message of the attacks, the airstrikes at Balakot. The government of the day has signaled resolve, the fact that it is not going to be deterred by terrorist attacks or by Pakistan's nuclear weapons-enabled terrorism. And the larger story, of course, is the fact that as long as you have an infrastructure of terrorism in place in Pakistan, which recruits, trains, and pushes terrorists across the border, there can be no business as usual with Pakistan. That's the government's line as well. And that has, I think, to my mind, been the biggest learning from 2611. And I hope not only for about 2611, but also those previous attacks on Mumbai and indeed on the Indian mainland, is that one just hopes that all those lives have not been lost in vain. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Sandeep. That was a very fascinating story that you have weaved. I'm sure it's a result of a lot of research, which is seen in the 2 books that you have written, one of which I have read. Indeed, very fascinating. And I think both of us should write the next book together. Maybe we can make a difference.
Let's talk about it, sir.
Okay, so with that, ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of this session. We will now open the floor for question and answers, and I'm sure our speakers will enlighten us with their brilliant replies and their insight. Aishwarya, can you please go ahead with questions?
Yes, sir. One moment, please. Yes, sir. So there are 2 questions addressed to Commodore Uday Rao. One is from C3S Atreya. Very good point, Commodore Rao, about lack of importance given to coastal security. There continues to be a continentalist mindset. It seems to reflect the old martial racist theory, giving importance to northern states. Is this merely symptomatic of marginalization of peninsular India? Thank you. And the next question is posed by Amrita Saha to Commodore Uday Rao again. While we speak of proposals of Coast Guard under MHA and multidisciplinary National Maritime Authority, and with DMA coordinating all services, which is the one body which will serve as a true central intelligence agency and avoid future terrorist extremist attacks beyond state, age, and cadre divides amongst all relevant bodies involved? The next question is...
Aisha, just stop here. I think I'll answer that.
Okay, sir.
Before I lose track of these questions.
Okay, sir.
Okay. And I'm supposed to be the moderator, not the speaker, but nevertheless, you see, one is we are to the first question about whatever it is. You see, we are landlubbers. Okay. So that is the reason why you're talking of peninsular India, etc. The fact is, we've been a maritime nation for several years, hundreds of years, geostrategically and historically. But the fact is that we always looked up at the northern passes. We forgot that the invaders who came from the sea are the ones who actually colonized us, whether it's the British. Okay, then we had the 1993 Mumbai blast, which was mentioned here just now by Sandeep. So there is a lack of maritime consciousness in this country. There is a certain amount of sea blindness. We have had so many seafarers. Our sailors, use the monsoon winds to travel west and east. They used a Matsya Yantra. But the fact is that somewhere we took the eyes off the sea. So maritime consciousness, maritime sea-mindedness, these are something which we lost. I think if we are now coming back to it, is because one is 1993 blast to a lesser extent, but 2611 more. Also the Chinese ingress. These have raised our maritime consciousness of late. Now the major factor in this is the maritime governance part. You see, we have not changed. We are not adapted to ocean governance, ocean administration as yet. Right? So these are the reasons why we were caught napping. So the important thing is that our bureaucracy are all generalists. Many of them may not have seen the seas, may not have come down to the seas. Many may not have seen a ship. Many may not have been on a ship even for a day, and they will tell you what is right, what is wrong. Now, I'm not decrying all bureaucrats. There are good bureaucrats, good, bad. There are good naval officers, bad naval officers. But the fact is that unless we recognize that coastal security is important, that peninsular is also important, we will not get anywhere. So that's very important to remember that maybe this 2611 was a reminder. But I tend to be a pessimist at many times. I don't know whether we are ready. Sandeep said, never again. Yeah, it's a good resolve. Never again, 2611. But many things are still work in progress. I hope nothing of that sort happens. But I hope we have this National Maritime Authority. I still don't understand what is stopping the government from implementing this. This is the single most important, and naval and strategy experts have been talking of a maritime advisor for so many years. So if this has not come through, then the question is why? Why is that even a 2611 can't wake us up? Coming to the second part of your question, you mentioned about intelligence and associated statements. It doesn't matter whether the Coast Guard is under the MOD or MHA. It really doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether you've got new Department of Military Affairs. The fact is the government said that they will give us a multidisciplinary National Maritime Authority, which means that all other organizations, be it internal security related, be it defense related, will all plug in. They will maybe they have the reps, but National Maritime Authority would be the headmaster. Okay, now it could be anybody, it could be a civilian, could be an admiral or whoever it is. But the fact is that currently we are all focused on J&K and Northeast. Nobody is looking at the maritime. So you're talking of a true intelligence agency. But the fact, these are two separate questions. The issue is the IB and the RAW can give you, to a large extent, strategic intelligence. I think the Navy and the Coast Guard will have to generate their own operational level intelligence and tactical intelligence. We don't require another central intelligence agency, as you seem to suggest in your question. We want the NSCS to be able to connect the dots. If you create one more central intelligence agency, then it will only add to make things worse. So we've got enough intelligence agencies in this country, but they really have to pool these information. MAC is fine. But if the dots were connected, we would not have had 2611. I don't know if there are any changes in the intelligence agency post 2611. I am not aware. But the fact is that we don't require another central intelligence agency. Adequate intelligence exists. Most of it with the agency will look at strategic intelligence. The Navy and the Coast Guard have to develop their own operational level and tactics, which they're doing, especially with the IFC in Delhi. So that is my answer to your two questions. Okay, now Aishwarya, the next question, please.
Yes, sir. The next question is to Vice Admiral Muralidharan, and it's posed by, just a minute, sir, by C3S Chennai, a member of C3S Chennai. The question is, Coast Guard was designated as the lead intelligence agency some years ago. What is the assessment of its effectiveness, and what more can be done to ensure that Coast Guard is able to really become a lead intelligence agency in the maritime domain?
Thank you, Aishwarya. Actually, Coast Guard is not only for intelligence, but it's supposed to be coordinating with all agencies for looking after the aspect of coastal security. And since 2611, lots of changes happened. As you can, I'll just give you one example. When though it's a sad incident, when the Enrica Lexi incident happened, when the coastal police actually reported that the fishermen had reported some firing incident, some people have been fired upon. Moment it came to Coast Guard, the Maritime Operations Center were quickly able to localize the area and send out forces, contacted the chap, and we were able to get that ship into Cochin. What happened subsequently is a different thing. But the fact that you were able to shortlist and find out things. So a lot of beginning has been made, and it's a continuing process. As Commodore Rao was also mentioning, so Coast Guard is the coordinator, and there is enough. We don't need another agency, but so long as the inputs keep coming from the other agencies, I think a big beginning has been made because they're able to monitor the coastline and is able to get a lot of inputs. Thank you.
Okay, sir. The next question is addressed to, the next two questions are addressed to Mr. Sandeep Unithan. The first question is by Danesh Sankyayan. His question is, did we have enemies within our country helping LET post and pre-2611? And the second question is posed by J. Maniar. How can India get rid of the ISI in absolute terms? Can we employ a strategy akin to the entire wipeout of terrorism, even if we have a routine, even if we have to routinely cross borders and synonymize it to our dealings with the ISI? The deep state has been a pain like no other that India has known since independence, and its mysterious nature since 1947 continues to remain a puzzle.
Yeah, thank you, Aishwarya.
Yes.
The first question: did we have? Did the LET have help in India? Well, there's no evidence to suggest they did, especially for 2611. But you can't rule out the fact that they had moles in India. There was Zabiuddin Ansari, if you remember, one of the handlers of 2611 is actually from Nagpur, and he was actually sitting there in the control room with the LET guys directing these attackers. That's the only clear link that's emerged, and there's possibly other guys who've kind of helped with the overground workers, that kind of thing. But the entire attack was planned across the border. Now the second question is that can we get rid of the ISI? I don't think you can get rid of the ISI. The ISI is almost a part of the Pakistan. It's exactly a part of the Pakistan Army. It's an organ of the Pakistan Army. It's staffed by Pakistan Army officers. It's actually foolish to see them as two different, distinct entities. The DGISI reports to the Pakistan Army chief, and this is one of the things that Pakistan has very successfully built, this narrative that, oh, we don't know what the ISI is up to. It's almost like another non-state actor over there. Our strategies against the ISI have to be the strategies that we employ against the Pakistan Army itself, and that there are panelists over here who are far more qualified to talk about this. But all I can say is that you have to raise the costs of what they are doing to us. You cannot sit for 15 years. You can't have your number one economic capital attacked repeatedly by the Pakistan Army's ISI and not do anything about it. The worst I think we did in 15 years was not to play cricket with them. So the thing is that now we've seen a complete change in approach, simply because you have people there who've been through this game, who've kind of understood this thing. And one of them has actually gone so far to say that, look, if you do another 2611, prepare to lose Balochistan. So that comes out of an understanding of the game, the great game that's being played against us, and which is the reason that you see an all-of-government approach now towards handling terrorism emanating from Pakistan, that we will not have any relationship with you, whether it's cultural, or it's cricket or films or diplomatic or any other kind of thing, that it's not going to be business as usual until you shut down this infrastructure of terrorism. There are, of course, many other ways that this can be done, but the one thing is that it has to be an all-of-government approach, and you have to make the Pakistan Army realize the consequences of what it's doing.
Thank you, sir. So one more question has come in, and Vice Admiral Muralidharan, that the previous question was posed by Commodore Vasan to you. The next question coming in is, I don't know who it's addressed to. It's by C3S Atreya. The question is, why are there attacks only on Mumbai and not on other coastal cities? Mumbai, being the major financial center, does not merely explain this phenomenon.
Who would like to take on this question, please?
Okay, I'll take it on. I think one of the reasons, of course, it starts with the fact that Mumbai is a major commercial center, and anything that happens there gets magnified to an extent. Secondly, you'll also see that there is a lot of, it's very densely, thickly populated. People from all parts of India are there for, job. And there are daily people coming to Bombay looking for employment. So it is very easy for a stranger to merge in that group and activate. That is one reason. Secondly, is also closer from where these people originate. Now imagine if he has to come down south or go around the coast of India, going to Chennai, etc. That becomes more difficult. So essentially, it is the commercial hub being there. It's a big city with lots of people all over. In fact, Bombay is probably one of the cities, even Delhi is not so bad. You don't know who your neighbor is, even when you live in a colony. You don't know who your immediate neighbor is. It doesn't happen in most other cities in India. At least you know your neighborhood. So when a stranger is seen, people exchange notes. That didn't happen there. And let me also tell you, when I got this thing in the 2611 time, I was in Bombay, posted in a particular job. And the first input I got was that there is some firing going on in Colaba, that's very close to in the naval area, that area. And the input also that it appears to be a gangland war between two gangs because they're fighting. So as in charge of that particular thing, my immediate reaction was to tighten security on all the naval establishments. I told them we activate security so that nobody trying to flee the thing. It's later, I think that's why even the Bombay police probably took it as a gangland war, and gangs normally don't attack cops. So when the whole gamut changed, when it was realized that it was terrorism, but it took us later. But that's the kind of level that we had at that stage. I mean, hopefully things are very much changed. I don't think that can happen again. But then, as one of the previous speakers said, we are not going to be, nobody's going to repeat it because you have to, they will also be innovating. So we have to be that much more alert. Thank you.
Commodore Rao, can I come in very quickly?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, thank you. My point is that the Pakistan Army figured in the early 90s that, you look at the pattern of the attacks and the years that they began, 93, 2006, 2008. This is when the Indian economy had started picking up after liberalization. So they were targeting our growth, economic growth. So this is not like a isolated thing of a small non-state actor. This is the Pakistan state itself trying to stop our liberalization economic progress by attacking one of the growth engines. And if you look at the targeting again in 93, it's against the stock exchange, it's against 5-star hotels. 2006, it's against commercial transport, civilians. It's to create the illusion that this city is not safe for investment. You can't do business here. It's not business as usual. 2008 again, they deliberately target foreigners for the first time to tell people, look, Mumbai is not a safe city. You can get killed in 5-star hotels. You can get killed while driving in commuting to work. So this whole thing has been to target Mumbai. This 15-year war that I call that the Pakistan Army waged from 93 to 2008 has been against Bombay. And secondly, very quickly, Admiral Muralidharan is being very modest about his role in 2611. He's played a very, very crucial role in alerting the state government of the existence of the Marine Commandos. And there's in my book, if you read it, there's a very interesting conversation where Mr. Johnny Joseph, who's the Chief Secretary of the Maharashtra state, actually calls up Admiral Muralidharan because they speak one language in addition to Hindi and English, and they communicate there, and he says, look, we are under attack, what do we do? So Admiral Muralidharan says, well, we have Marine Commandos, you can ask for them. And that is how the Marine Commandos actually came in on the night of 2611, and to my mind, they played the biggest role there. They saved 150 guests in the Taj chambers, and that was all thanks to that one conversation. Thank you.
Okay, I also want to add my 2 bit here. Atreya, that's a very good question, but don't be under the impression that it will only be Mumbai. I feel the next target is going to be the Gulf of Kutch or the Gulf of Cambay. The amount of chemical factories and refineries we have, and being closer to Pakistan, that could be possibly, if at all, it will happen. I hope it doesn't. But it could be the target, as also our offshore oil fields. They're also constant. And I am not saying this. If you see the newspaper, there are always inputs about some, thing about Pakistani agents collecting information about oil rigs. Similarly, sometime back in the Gulf of Cambay, Gulf of Kutch, etc. So while we hope, with all our this thing that we don't have a 2611 or an attack somewhere, but I am sure if it comes, it will come in this area. But God forbid, it should not happen. That's why I'm concerned. But that I feel. So Bombay may not always be a target. I think with all the greenfield refineries, etc., Gulf of Kutch, Gulf of Cambay, and all our industries there, it's a tinderbox. That's my thoughts on the subject. Any more questions, Aishwarya?
No, sir. No other questions.
Okay, great, ladies and gentlemen. It's been a fascinating little discussion we have had. 3 eminent speakers was spoken at length and given their views. We could not have asked for anything better. Thank you so much, Admiral Muralidharan, Sandeep Punithan, and Himadri Das. Thank Thank you so much. And over to Commodore Venugopal.